Hello, everyone. I think we're live. Thank you very much for listening. Whether you're listening to this now live or later on the recording. I'm going to introduce my final course for the year, which is a new course on Heidegger's Essence of Technology, for which begin on October 18th and 19th. I'm going to go over the text we're going to read, what the seminars will be like, and also when the seminars are and how everything works if you have never signed up for any course. Now, we started this year at Halcyon in, I think, March with a weekend seminar on the Italian movement of Futurismo. I went to see the exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in Rome in February, and also, of course, read some of the main manifestos around the same time. And so now we're bringing this year to a close after a long course on Goethe's Faust, which is the story of how we became modern. We're now bringing this year to a close with close readings of what Heidegger sees unfolding in technology, which to him is not so much about technological tools, but which is the epoch of being. The current main epoch of being is Gestell, the concentration of forceful, challenging force that transforms beings into Bestand, standing reserve. So what we're going to do at the course, enrollment for which is now open, and as I opened early enrollment last week, for anyone who was on the list, who had downloaded the syllabus, more than half of the places in the seminars have already been filled. So if you want to partake in the seminars, now's the time to sign up. It's now almost 4 years ago that it's almost 4 years ago. It was January 2022 or February 2022 when I last taught a course on Heidegger on technology. So if that's any indication, it might be another 4 years by the year 2030, that I might be able to teach another course on Heidegger on technology again. So if you want to go through these texts with me and understand what Heidegger means by the essence of technology, etc., then now is the time to enroll. So the link to enroll is in the description of this video and also in the replay of the live chat. You're watching this later or right now in the live chat. Now, I'll be here for about half an hour. If you have a question, ask your question in the chat. I'll respond to your question either at the end, or if it actually makes sense, I'll respond to the question immediately when it comes in. So ask questions on Heidegger, technology, and specifically on this course. If you have any questions, what the courses are like, etc. So what our students say is that Halcyon courses are everything that university should have been, but wasn't, could have been, but wasn't, etc. So I'm going to go over now which text we're going to read. I'm going to show you what the course looks like on the inside, the lectures, etc. There are 6 lectures in total. It's about 8.5, 9 or 10 hours of video content, which you should listen to after you've done the reading in preparation for the seminars. So this time we're going to do 3 weekend seminars of 2 hours per day. So Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. The first weekend will be October 18th and 19th, Saturday and Sunday again, 6 to 8 p.m. European time. I think that's 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if you're in the US. So it's a good time for anyone in this hemisphere, I think, to join in. And it'll give you enough time to prepare, let's say, on a Friday evening, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and then again, either Saturday evening, Sunday morning, or Sunday in the afternoon. And of course, also during the week, in the evenings, perhaps, if you are very pressed for time. But what we're going to do in the first weekend is we're going to read Heidegger's The Question Concerning Technology, die Frage nach der Technik. And we're going to split the essay in two. So we're going to read the first half for the first day and the second half for the second day. Because very often what you'll find is that commentators, go into that, as I mentioned before, that beings become or transformed into now appear as standing reserve Bestand, or even standing resource, perhaps. But what we have to understand is that this is a destining, a Geschick, a sending, a self-sending of being. It's the epoche of being in this age, let's say. So we want to understand and trace what it is that Heidegger is after in this pivotal essay, which was a public lecture that he gave at the Technical University of Munich in the 50s. That what he asks is not the question of technology, really. After what's an iPhone, what's an aeroplane, etc. Well, how do they all hang together? But he asks as always the question of being. And he does so from the vantage point of Seinsgeschichte, the history of being, or perhaps the tidings of being, also, rather. How history unfolds in its own history, of which the human being is a suffering participant. And the peculiar role that the human being has is that the human being is in between being reduced to Bestand, standing reserve, and also executing the demands by being to transform everything, including himself, into standing reserve. So we're going to trace this development. So the first weekend looks at the question concerning technology, the Ereignis, Seinsgeschichte, history of being, the event, etc. Because that's related. You can't really understand the text, the question concerning technology, without having at least without having heard of what the Ereignis is and what Heidegger means by the question of being. So this is really crucial. If you want to understand Heidegger's philosophy of technology, let's say, you really also have to consider. Heidegger's writings in the contributions of philosophy, etc. So I'm going into what Heidegger means by some of those terms that might just go over your head in the lectures. So what I propose is that you sign up today, you start reading, and it's enough time. It's the 30th of September, so it's 3 weeks until we start. That means by the time we start, you've had enough. Every lecture has been uploaded. So if you start reading today, you read the first essay on your own, you take notes, handwritten notes, and then you listen to my lectures. You go back over your notes, etc. So there's enough time to start preparing. And then the seminars, and I'll say this again, more than half of the places have already been filled. So sign up now if you can. If you sign up for the seminars, you'll get notified, by the way, I should say this now, via email about a week before the first seminars. You'll receive the Zoom link via email. But the best thing to do is to read everything on your own, then listen to the lecture, go back over your notes, come into the seminars, and then ask your questions. The seminars will be, as I said, intense weekend seminars, which will allow us to go in depth on some of the most important essays that Heidegger wrote on the matter. And on the first day, on the Saturday, we'll just basically go almost line by line over to introduce, to lead us into that crucial essay. And as we're doing so, you'll realize what Heidegger's thinking path really means, what he's trying to open up. Second day, we'll do basically the same, but there will be breakout sessions on the second day. So that means that you actually then talk to the others during the session as well. So there'll be small groups for about 10 or 15 minutes each, which will allow you to discuss your thoughts with the others, which is also always what people really enjoy, is, of course, that you meet others who have similar interests. Thank you very much, Harris, for gifting 50 memberships. That's very generous of you. And I hope that those who receive them are deserving of them and will make good use of it. So thank you very much, Harris. I hope you can make it to this course. Perhaps would be good to have you in this one. So the first weekend, I'll say this again, is, and if you have a question on Heidegger, on technology on this course, let me know in the chat now. I'll be here about another 20 minutes, and if you have a question, I'll respond to it either immediately or at the end, if depending on when it makes the most sense. So the course then, after the first weekend seminar, we'll move on to, and this is the enrollment page just to show you this, we'll move on to a dialogue on language with a Japanese, which is a sort of collection or remembrance by Heidegger of several conversations, many conversations, uncountable conversations that he's had over the decades with various visitors from Japan about the let's just say, to put it simply, the differences between the European and the Japanese language. Now you're wondering, why do we read something on language? Well, I think especially in the age of AI, and so Stephen says, thank you. So thank you. That's thanks to Harris for gifting a membership. And I hope that you are deserving, but certainly you are. So see you at the course, hopefully, as well. So now, with the advent of LLMs, which have been misnamed as AI, and which have been confused by some as, sacred machines, etc., all the typical materialist nonsense. But this attack on language by LLMs is significant. And it also works by correspondence truth, by a certain truth that just looks for the correct answer, which is Heidegger would trace to what? Well, to European philosophy. Heidegger says what happens in the technicization of the world, this is not a neutral movement. It's ultimately the Europeanization of the world at the moment in which Europe forgets itself. And thus Heidegger says we need dialogue with the Far East as much as we need dialogue with ancient Greece, so that through that dialogue and in the radical otherness between the European house of being, the European languages, and the Japanese house of being, we could perhaps come back to our senses. So it's not that, it's you go out in order to return home changed, but you return to your own dwelling place. And crucially, at the very beginning, so we're going to read of this dialogue, we're going to read about half of it, which is the most important, I think, when it comes to our time and what we're interested in this course here. So this is going to be the second seminar, the first day of the second weekend, will be on a dialogue on language with a Japanese, because as the Japanese interlocutor relates, it's the European concepts, European philosophical concepts, that are now required in order to do what? In order to achieve an understanding, or in order to be able to understand and how to manage the technical systems of the age. So we're going to look at how the language, the European philosophical language, is, according to Heidegger, has been reduced to a language of Gestell. And insofar as Gestell is a destiny of being, this would, of course, make sense, but it's being that's convulsing. It's being that works against itself. In its Unwesen, as Heidegger says, usually translated as in essence, which doesn't make sense in English at all. But Unwesen is, in English, is something like a dreadful state of affairs, is what perhaps in English one might say, but it's dread. It's sein Unwesen treiben, which is not to do mischief or anything, but really is to inflict upon the world terror by acting out certain aspects of one's being that are against one's being. That's what being is as Gestell, and we need to follow this thought through. Because, as Heidegger says, the world is being technicized under the assumption of a universal history. And so this kind of universalism, is to be gotten over. So Heidegger was not a Neoplatonist, to put it mildly. The second day of the second weekend, on the Sunday, we're going to read Science and Reflection. Wissenschaft und Besinnung. Reflection is a terrible translation. Should rather be something like Science and Awareness, Science and Mindfulness, or Science and Coming to One's Senses. But we'll get into this later. So all the many mistakes in the translations we're going to look at as well. But here Heidegger does something else. Here he opens up a dialogue with ancient Greece, with theoria and episteme. So that is going to be the second day of the second weekend. Science and Reflection. A text that's not often read when it comes to Heidegger and technology. It's often ignored, but I think it's crucial because it looks at how theory, as he says, ultimately structures or informs reality. And we could expand that, for example, to ideology. Yeah. So this is a much more even radical essay than, for example, the essay on the Age of the World picture, which is also important, which you can read alongside everything if you want to. But here we look at the origin, or how theory gets reduced, theoria gets reduced to theory, and how this opens up a field of vision for the sciences to format the world, so that things as they are in themselves, let's say, don't show up, but what is ultimately just done is to prove the hypothesis of the theory, the notorious Procrustes bed of the scientific model. So that's the second weekend. The final weekend, the third weekend, so now we've done 4 seminars. The final weekend is going to focus on what seems to be a brief essay by Heidegger, Die Kehre, the turn or the turning, depending on your translation. And we're going to, it's about 9 or 10 pages. So we're going to read about half for every day. And this is going to allow us to think back over what we've been discussing so far, and also try and understand what it is that Heidegger means with what, which is what he says in the first paragraph of the question concerning technology, which is how can we establish, or how can there be a free relationship with techniques? So what does Heidegger mean by die Kehre? What does he mean by, when he says notoriously in the Spiegel interview, only a God can save us now? What is this saving? Who is this God, or what is this God? What is the last God, etc. So those are the things we're going to discuss in the final 2 seminars. A free relationship with technology, and the last God, saving. And of course, what we're always going to come back to is the notion by Hölderlin, the quote from Hölderlin from Patmos, which Heidegger again and again comes back to in most of his writings on technology. Wo aber Gefahr ist, wächst das Rettende auch. Where there is danger, there salvation, or the saving power, the saving grace grows also. We want to understand what that means. We want to understand, and I think what you'll see with the cause is that Heidegger is not a reactionary and is not, as he says himself, I am not against technology. So let me just go over. Here's a good question. I'm going to get to this in a second. So if you head over to the enrollment page now and just take a look at it, yeah? There are 3 different tiers you can choose from. If you have time for the seminars, all seminars are recorded for the group, so we'll make good use of Gestell and frame them forevermore, or maybe not, because the internet, tends to forget everything. So you can see here, these are the lectures. You can see that's the first one is 76 minutes. You can see about the length, roughly, of how long the videos are. There are 3 different tiers. The middle one is most popular, Philosophical Fellowship live Zoom seminars. That's what I've been going on about now. If you don't have time for, I would say, at least half of the seminars, you can't cut out 2 weekends or something for this, or let's say about 3 out of the 6 sessions. If you really don't have time for this, just take the reader tier, ideal for self-study. You can learn at your own pace. The video lectures, etc. And I relate in the first video how to approach the course, what you should do, so you can go through this even on your own. If you'd like to take additional private tutorials with me, then take the upper tier, which includes 3 private tutorials with me, 19 minutes each. And I should mention, if you are enrolled in either this tier or the Philosophical Fellowship, then there will be a final additional seminar, which the date of which we'll agree on towards the end of the weekend block seminars, which is going to be the symposium, where you may present your own work, which does not at all have to be academic. I'd be quite keen to see maybe a video that you make, a poem that you write, or ways in which you think technology can be overturned from within. Or what Heidegger doesn't see. I gave a talk last week at the University of Bergamo, which had the title Asking Heidegger's Question of Technology Again, in which I suggested that what Heidegger very often touches upon, but then doesn't follow through, especially in his writings on Gestell. So we need to look at certain tendencies, let's say, of Christianity, and also where Christianity, of course, comes from, and consider how those trajectories feed into Gestell. Yeah. So if you have questions, let me know now, because I'm going to leave in about 5 minutes. And I really, really want you to enroll. I'm going to show you what the course looks like on the inside in a second. So Sobik asks, would you turn? No, sorry. Is it required to have knowledge of Heidegger to take this course? I take it. And well, I think what is required is a sense of urgency. And what does Heidegger always say? Heidegger says, there's all these various interests that we have. And we could quote Nietzsche, who says that modern European man is epidermally interested, etc. So this is not a course that, this is not philosophy second level. You need to have done this so that you can regurgitate back at me the concepts of Gestell. I don't care for that. If you sense the urgency that we need to ask the question, what is Heidegger says this himself, even just for him asking the question, what is the essence of technology? Was ist das Wesen der Technik? What is its domain? What is its dominion? That gave people headaches. Because they were so, and as he continuously points out, they're so enthralled by the use of them. And then, the questions such as, do we use this peacefully or do you use it for war? And then this is deemed to be ethics. It isn't. If you sense urgency, if you want to know what it is that's unfolding, and Heidegger always says the danger must show itself as danger. Yeah, the danger must show itself as danger. Then, only then, can we begin to ponder really what is the dominion of techniques. So that is what you need to have. You need to have an openness and a sense of wonder and awe for what is and what shows itself in this epoch. Yeah. So George asks, and I forgot whether you've enrolled. Or I don't know if you have enrolled, but it seems like you have. Could you please elaborate more on Christianity and Gestell? Will we touch on this in the seminar? Yes. Last question I'll answer first. Yes, we will. There's plenty of that in the video lectures that I've recorded already. And I'm not going to elaborate more on this now, but I can tell you that on my channel, there's a video, as you know, on the contributions on Heidegger, the abandonment of being in Christianity. And that is exactly what we are going to discuss as well. And for Heidegger, it has to do with the reduction. So, it's not, as he always says, Heidegger always says, this is not what he's addressing is not the God of the faith. He's addressing the God of the philosophers. The causa sui, or causa prima. The Spinozist God, the rationalistic God, the overly rationalistic God of St. Thomas, etc. A misguided Aristotelianism. That's the God he addresses. And Aristotle has no creator God, of course, but the reduction for Heidegger, the philosophical reduction of God to a creator God, this is oversimplifying it, but leads to beings becoming Gemächte, so products. And that, in some sense, feeds into Gestell. But we also have to understand that there's an eschatology in Gestell. So briefly on this, Harris, email me, and then we can figure something out. So yeah, please just email me. That makes it easier for me to think about what's possible. So this is what it looks like on the inside. Once you've enrolled, you click on lecture 1. So it tells you how to approach this course. So what's publicly available, I've linked to. You can find these telling you exactly what to read. And then here's the lecture. And yeah, so you can listen to the lecture. I would suggest, as I always, the most important thing is you do the reading. And then you listen to the lecture. The lecture guides you or prompts you and points you to something that maybe you didn't see. And because you've taken handwritten notes in a dedicated notebook, so you'll see me in this lecture course. Let me just find maybe a place where you can see this? No. I have somewhere probably, of course, I won't find it now. Anyways, I'm reading, so I have no script for these lectures. What I worked with was a notebook, which is here. So this is filled with notes on the 6 lectures, and I went off my notes to, and of course I also had the books with me. So this is dedicated to this course. That means in a few years from now, 5, 10, 20, I can go back over my notes. I remember they're in here. And that generates a continuum of memory in your being. There's so much talk about fragmentation, etc. Take handwritten notes. First step to reclaim your inner being. Yeah. So all lectures, just to show you this again, this is the second one on the second half of the first essay we're reading. So you can go through them, complete and continue, etc., etc. You can leave comments. And so let's say if you don't enroll in the seminars, you leave a comment, and in time, I might respond. I usually respond in time, not immediately. That's another thing you have to learn, is that nothing is immediate. You know, there's no instant gratification. There's a question before by Sobik, you know, what's required to have knowledge before, of Heidegger. What's required is that you don't suffer from instant gratification demand. This is going to be difficult. This is going to be dislodging. And that's the best thing that could happen to you, is that, because, you know, one of the reasons for me to leave university is that we're not allowed to take our students seriously. They're either customers, and the customer is always right, as I was told by a professor at Warwick. Make the customer happy. Or, of course, they're all snowflakes, etc. And so you can't really touch them ever. And so you can't say anything to them. But if you don't take them seriously, how are they ever going to grow? So what you have to do, as a professor, you know, first of all, I'm the learner here. But when it comes to not just the teaching side, but the other side, when you address someone, you have to be able to address them so that they begin to take themselves seriously. But you have to be able to criticize what they're saying. Die Sache, yeah, den Sachverhalt, so the heart of the matter. It's not personal. So that's also important. And this will be what you have to be open to, I think, is that you really have to bracket. So you forget what you think you know about technology. You forget what you think you know. You may have heard about Heidegger. It doesn't matter. You have to go through this in a manner that allows you to open yourself up to what it is that Heidegger sees in technology, and why he comes to call its domain Gestell, the gathering concentration of challenging forth that places everything and turns everything into standing reserve. That is the first step to establish what? A free relationship with being in this epoch, which is technics. So as Heidegger himself says, I am not against technology. Yeah. I am not against technology. I want to understand it in its essence. So this is something that, you know, the Spiegel interview is known the world over. The much more important conversation that he had with Richard Wisser is not known so much. unfortunately. And in this conversation from 1970, Heidegger says it's a public interview, was a television documentary on him by Southern German television channel, where Heidegger explicitly says, I want to understand, I never speak of the demonic nature of technology. I want to understand what it is in its essence, how it unfolds, what it means historically. And then he says, and I see in it the prelude of the Ereignis. So in technics, not this, but in technics, we can make an experience with being to a degree, I think Heidegger doesn't say this, but to a degree that perhaps hasn't been possible yet, so that we become fully aware of being. And its multidimensionality. So if you're interested in Heidegger and the question of being, we are going to touch on this. We're not just, we're not, so there will be other things that we can discuss, but this was going to be one of the main questions, obviously. So thank you, everyone who. Okay, John Stanland asks, will you cover the relation to the nothing and technology? So, the nothing. What we are going to touch on in the, and I think, there's a lot there, because no one just asks this kind of a question without already having a notion, a hint of what could be hiding here. So good question. The simple answer is yes. I mean, it's not whether I will cover anything, it's whether we will address this. And we are addressing it in most likely the third seminar and lecture, in where we're reading the dialogue on language with a Japanese visitor. Where Heidegger addresses that what he has referred to as das Sein, being, may have been from the beginning the wrong term because it is too metaphysically charged. And that perhaps what emptiness or nothingness would have been a better term. And so, but there's other ways of approaching this question. Depends on what you mean by the nothing and what you mean by technology. In some sense, once you start speaking of the unessence of being, the way in which being cramps itself and begins to work against itself as Gestell, you have to understand there's a certain perhaps negativity at work here also. But then on there's another dimension of this, which is another aspect perhaps, which is that you could understand in sort of a fear of, not a psychological fear, but a genuine ontological anxiety about the nothing leads to being exploding in terms of ordering all beings as Bestand, so that there's an overabundance of stuff to cover over the existential dread of the nothing. There's many ways to approach this. So John, I hope that you join us, and we will get into this. Yes, I think the best moment to begin starting about this is really with the third seminar. But that gives us 4 seminars to discuss this. Because in the turn, you could say that a proper understanding of the nothing is crucial for the turn die Kehre, to not overcome techniques, not overcome this age, but actually enter into it and overturn it from within. And then, of course, ultimately at the symposium, you may wish to present on this question. And what it is that you found. So good question. Thank you so much, John, for asking this at the end here. So let me just maybe briefly, if you allow me, everyone, go over the different tiers. Again, I'll just say that seminars begin in 3 weeks. So there's enough time. You don't have to decide now. But if you do sign up now, then obviously you've got enough time to start preparing, really. There's about less than half places left in the seminars. First block seminar, so it's going to be weekend seminars, which means that we're going to pack 6 seminars into 3 weekends, 18th and 19th, 25th and 26th of October, and then the 1st and the 2nd of November. Always 6 to 8 p.m. European time, Central European time, 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And there will be a symposium, the 7th seminar, the date of which we're going to confirm at a later point together. So, the most popular tier, as always, is the Philosophical Fellowship live Zoom seminars. I lead the seminars. There's not going to be a TA or anything. And we're going to go through the texts basically line by line. So close reading of the texts. There will be some time for breakout sessions as well. And of course, for you also to ask questions. If you really don't have time for at least half of the seminars, take the reader tier, which is down here. Access to everything indefinitely. The course materials, which again, if you're just joining us now, looks like this. So 6 lectures in total. You can see the first one is 76 minutes, 85 minutes, 62 minutes, etc., etc. So this is what it looks like on the inside. You can leave a comment and I'll respond in time. So, and if you'd like to take additional private tutorials with yours truly, about 90 minutes each, then take the philosophical dialogue tier, which you find right here. So choose the study path that's really right for you. Oh, there are also, I should have mentioned, there are also payment plans. So 2 payments, that's for the seminars, and that's for the private tutorials. I should add one for the self-study tier as well. I will do so right after. So again, thank you ever so much, everyone, for listening. And I hope sincerely that you will join us. We're already a good group, and the more the merrier, but there's a limit, as with everything. And Heidegger also says, in the beginning of the Question Concerning Technology essay, that we have to find what the limitation of Gestell is, because it seems so overly powerful, especially when we think about digital surveillance, digital IDs being rolled out in the UK, Palantir, which may not be as powerful as they claim they are, because they have a bit of the CEOs, let's say, or the founders have they seem to be a bit like what's the word I'm looking for? Barkers, I don't know, Marktschreier. So they snake oil salesmen, perhaps. But still, their quote-unquote AI is being used to slaughter people in Gaza. And they have no qualms about it, of course. And they're saving Western civilization as they do so. And so maybe now we can see the danger as danger. Maybe we can see that the assumption of an omniscient God, omnipotent, has also led here. And that perhaps when Descartes declares certainty over his own being, he doesn't secularize Christian certainty or religious certainty. No. What he does is he claims certainty against this unknown God, at whose mercy we are. or not, of course. Depends which simulation you're in. So, simulation theory, if you want to know about simulation, simulacrum, etc., that, of course, Baudrillard, you can't understand Baudrillard without Heidegger. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Enroll now. This is the link to enroll. It's in the description of this video. And also here in the